Christian, seek not yet repose. The title of this message to the church is Christian, seek not yet repose. Our Bible text is taken from 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11. And it reads, "Lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices." After the recent declaration of the state of emergency in Rivers State, a public analyst on YouTube, Dr. Charles Akpoki, made a short video cast on the development in which he described the declaration of state emergency in Rivers State as, and I quote, state capture. Dr. Akpoki called it state capture. What does state capture mean? State capture by whom and for what purpose? While one might agree on Dr. Akpoki's analysis of state capture, we need to ask, who captured the state? Because it might not entirely be the president. There are other forces that have long determined to capture the entire Nigeria state for racial, cultural, and political domination through the manipulation of religion. Nigeria Christians should be reminded that there has been a sinister conspiracy to capture the entire country, not just one state in the country. Rivers State happens to be one of the key states that must fall before the entire country would be in the net. Those who link the state of emergency with preparations for 2027 elections are correct, but they might not be aware of the full picture. The sponsors of the politics of religion in Nigeria, in their goal to turn Africa into an Islamic continent, identified 7 African countries that should primarily be Islamized. Those 7 countries are Nigeria, Liberia, Ivory Coast, Kenya, Malawi, Congo, and South Africa. Of those 7 countries, the most important one for them is Nigeria. Since 1983, when the OIC formulated that strategy in London, surreptitious moves were started to undermine democracy and good governance, as well as freedom of choice in Nigeria. At present, the sponsors of the politics of religion seem to have found a candidate who will do anything to remain in power. In a recent prayer call entitled, a recent message that we delivered entitled "The Frog in the Pot," we made reference to a leaked letter which was purportedly written by the Islam in Africa organization to a leader of Nigeria many years ago. This was specifically in 1990. Salient instructions in that letter include, amongst others, please note, the instructions that were given in that letter. 1. Place total ban on all forms of worship by Christians. 2. Impose Sharia law on Nigeria. Islamize all universities, colleges and schools and courts of law in the Federal Islamic Sultanate of Nigeria. Please note that they even changed the name of Nigeria to Federal Islamic Sultanate of Nigeria. Number 3, formally proclaim the National Republican Convention, NRC, an old political party, the only national ruling Islamic political party, and phase out the Social Democratic Party, SDP, which is a party of infidels. The letter put in bracket, Social Democratic Party, SDP, a party of infidels. It should be remembered that Islam in Africa Organization, IAO, organized the Abuja conference that produced the communique entitled Abuja Declarations 1989. The letter that we are referring to surfaced in 1990, a year after that infamous conference. Some people might object that Social Democratic Party, SDP, could not have been referred to as a, in quote, a party of infidels in 1990 because SDP fielded a Muslim ticket of MKO Abiola and Babagana Kingibe in the election that was annulled in 1993, if you remember that bit of history. It was a Muslim ticket, like the current APC ticket of Tinubu and Shetima. In both instances, the MKO Abiola and Babagana Kingibe, as well as the Tinubu and Shetima Muslim ticket, it was a Yoruba and Kanuri ticket. What those people who might object that SDP could be referred to as a party of infidels, what they might not realize is that to the power brokers in Nigeria, infidel does not refer exclusively to non-Muslims, but it also refers to non-Fulanis. A lot of people do not realize that. Just like when you hear the word northerners, it doesn't include the Hausa, it doesn't include the Kanuri, it doesn't include the Nupe, the Tiv. North refers to Fulani. It is now common to hear the, in quote, North claim that Yoruba Muslims are not real Muslims. I mean, that was mentioned recently when they tried to launch Sharia in the Southwest and Yoruba Muslims kicked. The Yoruba Muslims were described as not real Muslims. The chosen party of the sponsors of the politics of religion then, around that period, 1990, was the NRC, the National Republican Convention. That might also be why the popular June 12 election was annulled. If we look at this matter critically, the real reason June 12 was annulled is because the chosen party did not win. The party of the infidels won. If NRC had won that election in 1993, that election might not have been annulled because NRC then will have carried the agenda, will have fulfilled the agenda of transforming Nigeria into federal Islamic sultanate. Another person might point out that if the instruction from Islam in Africa Organization, IAO, was that SDP should be phased out, how come SDP still exists? Because SDP is still existing today. But NRC, the supposedly, in quote, anointed party, is extinct. The answer was provided by the National Christian Elders Forum in one of its papers. At independence, there were three dominant political parties in the country. The Northern People's Congress, NPC. Northern People's Congress, NPC. The Action Group, AG, and the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons, NCNC. Both AG, the party of Awolowo, and NCNC, the party of Herbert Macaulay, which was later headed by Nnamdi Azikiwe, collapsed into NPC due to the greed and carelessness and compromise of the leaders of the indigenous ethnic nationalities. And those leaders are the political leaders, the traditional rulers, and the religious leaders. Their greed, their carelessness, and their compromise caused both AG, Action Group, and NCNC to collapse into Northern People's Congress. Thereafter, every major party that has formed the government in Nigeria has been a mutation of Northern People's Congress. It has been Northern People's Congress that has been ruling Nigeria from 1960. They are the ones ruling under different names. The National Christian Elders Forum described NPN. You remember NPN, National Party of Nigeria of 1979, Shagari's political party. That was NPC1. PDP, People's Democratic Party, that came up in 1999, that is NPC2. While APC, that came up in 2015, is NPC3. It is NPC that has been ruling Nigeria since independence because of the greed of the leaders of the indigenous ethnic nationalities. They were always willing to sell out. The leaders of the indigenous ethnic nationalities, the political leaders, the traditional rulers, the religious leaders, they were always willing to compromise. So, NRC was stepped down. NRC was stepped down. It was replaced by PDP, while PDP was replaced by APC. It is NPC3, APC, that now wants to institutionalize a one-party state. The agenda of APC now is to transmute into APC, into a one-party state, in line with that letter, with that instruction, that there should only be one Islamic party in Nigeria. That letter of 1990. Please remember, that letter of that instruction in 1990, it is what is still running. A former governor of Sokoto State, Alhaji Atahiru Bafarawa, warned President Tinubu to desist from attempts to create a one-party state because this matter is becoming glaring. In the news report carried by Daily Trust of 25th February 2025, I quote, Atahiru Bafarawa also warned against attempts to create a one-party state, calling it a dangerous path that could lead to instability, unquote. He went further, and I will quote again, Nigeria cannot afford a one-party system. A strong democratic order is essential for national progress and for future generations. Where did the idea for a one-party state come from? a letter from the Islam in Africa organization, the letter we referred to earlier, advocated that Nigeria should transmute into a one-party Islamic state. It is against that background that the development in Rivers State should be viewed and understood. That is where the state capture is going. The most astonishing aspect of the unfolding scenario is that the people most threatened by the conspiracies of the sponsors of the politics of religion are the ones, some of whose leaders, for pecuniary gain, personal selfish interest, are the greatest supporters of those behind the plot. So much information has been put out into the public domain, enough to have cautioned church leaders and the Christian elites, as well as poor Christians, into proactive steps to counter the conspiracy. So far, there has been an indifferent response from the quarters where viral counteractions are expected. In September 2013, God sent a word that, and I quote, "If care is not taken, in 30 to 40 years, Nigeria will be like Turkey." That word was published in a message in 2014, 11 years ago. After giving that word, that if care is not taken, in 30 to 40 years, Nigeria will be like Turkey. After giving that word, God made sure that it was published worldwide to wherever Nigeria Christians were. In 2013, 12 years ago, no one could have imagined the calamities, disasters, and tragedies that have befallen Nigeria. If people were told in 2013 about the horrors that APC would unleash upon Nigeria, they would have insisted it is impossible. If Nigerians were told that the 2023 elections would be brazenly hijacked and Nigerians would be helpless to stop it, it will have sounded outlandish. What about the hike in fuel price from 87 naira in 2013 to 1,050 naira in 2025? Whoever prophesied this in 2013 will have been dismissed as a prophet of doom. 12 years after the warning that Nigeria could be Islamized like Turkey, Constantinople, the only Christian chapel in Aso Villa no longer observes Sunday worship since the Muslim ticket came into power. Christianity has been locked out of the seat of power, out of the presidency. Where does it now have influence in the country? Meanwhile, there is no evidence that church leaders are worried or that they are alarmed. On the contrary, they are breaking bread with Islam, as we all witnessed during the last Ramadan, when the president of Khan went to break Ramadan fast with Muslims in Abuja. Church leaders are not worried. Rather than take steps to protect the church, some church leaders give the impression that the master they now serve is not the one who went to the cross at Calvary. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, Jesus Christ said, "No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold on to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon." Nigeria now has a generation of Christian leaders who see nothing wrong in breaking bread with Islam. They dine at the table of the Lord and dine at the table of Allah. All worrisome indications that should make any God-fearing person to tremble for the church in Nigeria. It is true that God has promised a new Nigeria. But every promise of God is conditional. When God makes a promise, humans must measure up to the requirements of God for the promise to be fulfilled. This call, this message, is an alert. We are not spreading panic. We are not spreading slander. We are alerting intercessors, the praying community. We are alerting Nigerian Christians not to relent in prayers for the church and the country. At this point, Nigeria requires divine intervention. At this point, the enemies of Christianity in Nigeria and the enemies of Nigeria are both inside and outside the church. They are inside the church, they are outside the church. The worst enemies of Nigeria are those inside the church, because they possess the capacity to neutralize the spiritual power of the church from within. Once the church is compromised from within, it will be unable to resist the enemies from without. Christian, seek not yet repose. Nigerian Christian, seek not yet repose. The real enemy is closer to you than you think. They are inside the church. Begin to pray that all those Christian leaders who are campaigning for APC, who are campaigning for corrupt politicians, all those church leaders who are supporting an evil government, that Almighty God do something about them. Almighty God, do something about those leaders. Because if God does not do something about them, they are preparing for 2027. May the Lord deliver his church. May the Lord help Nigerians. God bless you.